so much for coming along, and thanks again to Spacecubed and Jordan and everyone here for being, helping us be part of this. It's really enjoy it, and it's all about, well, basically Ammo was originally started because we just wanted to find a way to help startups and founders, and it's something that we really enjoy. So that's why we do this sort of stuff. We're a part of the community for probably the past 7 years. We sponsor things like Morning Startup over in Riff on Wednesday mornings, and I'm on the board of Startup WA, and the whole team at Ammo are really as involved as we can be with the ecosystem. So we just love helping out and being around innovative founders. It's good fun. So my name's Cam Sinclair, and I've founded Ammo. My background's actually in politics. I used to run election campaigns. And I also worked in Canberra as a media advisor for a while as well. And while what Ammo is a growth marketing agency, we do see the power of a little bit of PR. We don't think it's the be-all and end-all when it comes to startup marketing. In fact, it's probably a small part of the start, but there's a lot of really cool things that it can do for you when you're first starting out. So we'll go through that today and give you a bunch of tips and tricks about how to get in the media with your startup, and a little bit of a process and some do's and don'ts, I suppose. So hopefully go away from today with some really actionable things and ideas that you can go away and do. So just a little bit more about Ammo. We've worked with over 230 innovative businesses now. A few of those logos you might recognise, a few won't, but across Australia and in the US and Silicon Valley, we work with startups to grow, and we take quite a holistic approach, I suppose, to what marketing is. We believe it's a process, not a project. It's something which you build into your business on an ongoing basis, as opposed to a one-off thing. So that's our sort of philosophy, and we've seen a lot of really successful businesses come off the back of working with us. So that's what we do. I'm going to start with a little story. This is one of my startup flirting opportunities, I suppose. A few years back, a mate of mine, Nick, and I we went along to Startup Weekend, which if anyone's been to, or if you haven't been to it, you really should. Startup Weekend, go along on a Friday night with an idea, and then over the course of that 48 hours, you actually build a product, take it out to market, see what flies. And a lot of people end up, by the Sunday evening when they're pitching to a panel of investors, having actually raised money, made some sales for real money. And there's been quite a few successful startups come out of Startup Weekend. This was not one of them, but it was an example of what can be achieved in a very short amount of time. It's called Texty. And the premise was that teenage girls, the problem was that teenage girls find it really difficult to respond to awkward text messages. Well, not just teenage girls, but any of us. But that was the target market. And what they would do was upload a message that they needed to respond to, and then anonymously, and then the crowd could suggest the best responses to that particular text message.
What could go wrong?
A lot, as it pans out. So the headline there was "Crowdsource the ultimate replies to tricky text messages." So it was called Texty. We built it by Saturday afternoon. It was up and running. It was basically a Reddit clone, and so we had the functionality there. We put it out into the internet, and not a whole lot happened until sort of late on Saturday night, and we just saw this spike in people using it. And we found that someone had submitted it to a website called producthunt.com, which is actually a really great place to launch startups. It's sort of the list of new things, as new products as they emerge. And I think this was about 2016 or 17, and since then Product Hunt's become a massive website. But check it out, it's a really great place to discover new products. And so then by Sunday we had about 10,000 users on this thing, which we built the day before, which was amazing. And I think by that Sunday night, when we were getting ready to pitch, we were being hit up by the New York Post and the Daily Dot and dailymail.com to be in their media news websites, which was crazy. And so we pitched, and I think we won that. No, actually, I think we won that Startup Weekend. But the problem was we couldn't actually figure out how to make any money. As it turns out, teenage girls don't have any money or credit cards, or didn't at the time. So we ran it for a few days and kind of, or for a few weeks and kind of knocked it on the head. But not before it hadn't been done a little sort of circumnavigation of the world in the media circles. So we ended up in Cosmo magazine, 17, Glamour, MTV did a little piece. And the following week, the West Australian, a journo, called us on the Friday and said, "Oh, we hear you guys have been going viral with this texty thing. Can we do a story on you since you're locals?" So it had kind of done a lap and made it back to little old Perth by the end of the week. But the lessons were, I suppose, that the actual functionality of the technology wasn't anything new. It was just a different application of the same technology and with a specific market. So, if you can really understand the problem that you're solving for your customers, then you can go a long way. And then also just that something novel and something that captures people's imagination and people want to talk about it can capture the imaginations of journalists as well. And, these journos are always looking for something to write about. So that's what we're going to talk about today when it comes to the PR for startups. And then the other one, I suppose, is just because you have users and you're getting attention from the media and it feels really good and it feels like you're onto a winner, doesn't mean you have a business. If you can't make money out of it, then what's the point? So that was sort of that was our lessons there from Texty, and it's now long gone and defunct, but it was a fun little ride while it lasted. So why PR? Why would you do this? Why would you go down this path and sort of try to get in the media? Does anyone have any ideas why you would do this for your business?
Exposure.
Exposure? So what do you mean by exposure?
Just people don't know what they don't know.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. There are some other reasons as well. Any other reasons why you might do it?
Like social proof.
Social proof, yeah. So what do you mean by social proof?
That people has like a well-known reference. They
Yes.
exist and that you are like a good business.
Yep.
You're doing it.
Yep. It's someone else external to you that's saying that you're onto something. Yep. Absolutely. Say again?
Positioning.
Positioning. Yeah. So
Differentiation, how you're different to other stuff that's already out there.
absolutely differentiation. Yep. Yep. And so, yeah, I mean, absolutely all of those things. And then, as part of all of that, it's a lot of it is that you're associating your brand with other well-known brands. So I just showed you that list of logos. A lot of them were recognisable. And so it's not just you or friends or people that you know saying nice things. It's these recognisable, trustworthy brands that are running your story. And what happens psychologically there is that sort of social proof is that, hey, well, these guys who are reputable and I've known for a long time are talking about this brand. Maybe they're onto something. So there's a lot of sort of, psychology that goes on there. And the real thing as a founder is you're getting this validation that what you're doing and this crazy idea that you have isn't just a crazy idea in your head, it's something which other people are actually interested in. And so from that point of view, it can be super powerful. This happened a couple of weeks ago. This is the users on ammo.marketing's website. And a few weeks ago, out of the blue, we didn't actually put any effort into this. TechCrunch called us or emailed us and said, can we do a story on your growth marketing agency? And we thought, wow, don't know why, but absolutely, please do. And they essentially just sent us a bunch of questions, and we, spent a few days. This is a big deal for us. TechCrunch is a massive Silicon Valley media organisation, and here we are in little old Perth. And yeah, they essentially just wrote up verbatim our responses to the questions. And so you can see we had that big old spike in traffic, and then it pretty quickly went back to normal, maybe a little bit more elevated than it was before, but not much. So that's the cool thing about PR. It does give you that spike in activity, but really it's a sugar rush, right? It's a nice little burst in, attention and notoriety, but the next day, the headlines on that paper have rolled on, the dogs have barked, and the circus is somewhere else. So it just, with all of this, please do keep in mind, it's a nice burst of activity, it's a sugar rush, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have a continued ongoing sort of traffic or attention as a result. It's a one-off thing. And I've got another graph which I didn't include in here, but basically it's the scalability of a marketing tactic on the horizontal axis, and then how quickly you can get something out on the vertical axis. And PR is right down here in the bottom. So yes, you can get something out quick, but no, it is not scalable. And things like, SEO and content marketing and sales teams and word of mouth are up here in the sort of, the top right where you want to be. But PR is a great place to start, and for all of the reasons that you guys said, it creates content and social proof. There's a lot of good reasons for doing it early on. So the other thing to remember is that journos really do have a tough gig. I really feel for them. It's not like in the old days with that bloke with the hat and the typewriter and the cigar, when it was a bit more of a prestigious job. It's a pretty grindy job these days. Every day they wake up and they have empty pages and silent airtime to fill, and they need to find something interesting to fill it, but they can't just copy and paste something from the day before. It needs to be fresh. They have looming deadlines every day. And then on top of that, at the other end of the scale, they get blasted with thousands of cold emails from people wanting them to print their story. And so their job is to balance sifting through the haystack and finding some needle in there that's actually going to be worthwhile versus getting something out quickly and something of quality. And the other thing is that everyone, especially, early stage startup founders with not a lot of money, want to sidestep their revenue model. And so we've seen with, Facebook and the YouTube and social media these days, where they are actually taking their ad revenue, away from traditional media companies. The ad revenue is still really important to media organisations, and paywalls and things like that and memberships are starting to gain momentum. But these journalists are very aware that everyone would prefer them just to write a story rather than to buy an ad in their paper, which pays their wages. So they've got all these competing things going on. And so our job is, how do we help these guys to write a great story about us? That's the opportunity. And so putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what their motivations are is a massive part of getting great PR. The other question is, what constitutes news? Is it just the fact that you exist, or is it that you've launched, or that you've added a new feature, or that you've reached a milestone? But essentially, the definition of news is that it's timely, it's related to recent events, it actually has some relevance. And so thinking about those media platforms, they all have different audiences, and so they're all going to have things that are relevant to their audiences. TechCrunch isn't going to write a story necessarily about, just an event that's happening in Perth, because it's not relevant to their audience. Something which is previously unknown, that is noteworthy, has to be factual, or something that's different or novel. So, that all makes sense, but just keeping in mind that those are the boxes that have to be ticked if you want them to write something about you. They're not just going to write about you just because of the fact that you exist. Especially if you're not the 1001st dating app which does swipe left and right. Like, what is it about that you are doing which is different? Maybe it's about the type of niche that you're going after, or something that's novel about the way that you're completing that job for them. So being really clear about that. That's what we call a hook. So, how do you maximise your odds for getting in the news? Really, a lot of this is about relationships and trust. So if journos probably do need to have some level of trust that what you're saying is factual, they don't need to background check you and things like that, and trust comes from relationships. A lot of people say journos aren't your friend, but I think it's actually okay to be their friend. And I would say more, treat them like a client. You want to treat them just like as you would a paying customer. Look after them. Because at the end of the day, they have something of value to offer you, just as a client does. I have their angles. And what that means is really that one of the last things here is about timely and recent events. One of the easiest things to write about for a journo is something which is very related to something which is in the current affairs today. So sometimes timing is everything when it comes to angles. You know, if there is a massive data breach, or if Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram goes down for 6 hours and your product solves that problem, like that's super relevant and timely. And I would want to write about a company who can guarantee that that doesn't happen, for example. Or for a company that replaces some of the features that Facebook and WhatsApp does in case they go down again, or whatever that might be. So thinking about like what is that kind of slightly different way of coming at a story which is interesting and people are actually going to want to read, as opposed to reading a dot point, this is what we do and there's no other relevance outside or to the sort of periphery of what you're talking about. The other thing is, ever since we were cavemen, our brains have been wired to listen to stories and empathise with what other people are going through. That's how we prefer to absorb and process information. If we're just being bombarded with facts and figures without any context to our lives or without empathy to other people, it's super hard for us to understand it or to care about it even. And so you need to make people care before they start keying into the message that you're offering. And so the best stories aren't actually about the product or the software, it's about the people behind them, or it's about the people that benefit from them. So a really clear example, giving people a really clear example. And so you see on the news, after they get past the world news and the big stuff that's happening in the world, quite often they will have a story called a human interest story, which is something which doesn't really feel like it's part of the news, but it's something that's happening to someone in your community. It might be a little kid in hospital because, and they have a guide dog that helps them detect when they're going to have an epileptic fit. Or it might be an example that I'm going to give you in a minute, which is some musicians and a band who actually really do benefit from a streaming service which promotes local artists. So giving them that actual human element so people can tell their story is what's going to help people really key into the message that you're telling. And it's the same reason that social proof is really important, because people can see others benefiting from what you're doing. And as much as possible, if you can hand them everything on a silver platter, the journos, and what I mean by that is you can virtually write the article for them and give them the photo and the caption and links to the video and some research. And if you were to do that for a journo, you are going to be so much more likely to get a run, because it makes their lives easier. It saves them time from having to meet the crazy deadlines that they're given and with the limited resources. It saves them from having to find a video or a photographer inside their organisation to go out and film you. And so just all of those things are reducing the barriers that they have in their way to running a story on you. So as much as possible, if you can hand that with angles and a human element on top of a relationship with a journo, that's going to tick a hell of a lot of boxes towards getting you a run in the media. Here's another little example, which is a startup we work with called Hum, who are based now in Berkeley in the Bay Area, and were originally here at UWA on the jumper there. And a massive part of their business and growth has been from PR. And so when you look at their website traffic, it's like this, because although they've got an amazing product, it's also a patch which goes on your forehead and stimulates the frontal cortex of your brain, which is kind of weird and scary to most people when they first hear about it, despite 30 years of track record of science proving that what they're doing is legitimate. So the reason that they use PR and it works for them is because what we was talking about, where it leverages the brand credibility of those media organisations who are talking about them, and sort of turns the temperature down about the risk and the scariness of what they're doing, because it's a little bit more legitimate coming from a media organisation. So this is a big part of their growth, and these guys do the PR and the media really well. In fact, they've engaged a a PR agency out of Silicon Valley to do a lot of this stuff for them. And they see every time that one of these stories goes out, depending on the website, but they will get a spike in sign-ups and pre-orders and things for their product. So that helps a lot. So how do you get prepared? My view is the first thing to do is to write basically a one-page positioning statement. So it's just a Word doc, kind of like a reflection of your elevator pitch, but with a little bit less hyperbole, I suppose. So just be factual. Who are you for? Who are your customers? What do you actually do? What makes you different? Give some quotes and quotation marks from the founders. Like, it's going to sound weird, but in your language, writing out how you would like to be quoted in an article potentially, about why you started, about those motivations. Remember the story. Some reference facts and figures to save the journo time from having to go and search up on Harvard Business Review or something like that for themselves. Like, give them those facts and figures up front, which can add to the argument behind and support your story. And then a call to action. What do you actually want people to do? Just be clear. How do you get involved? Visit X and X website or download the app or whatever it is. Another one which goes a really long way is you can arrange your own professionally shot photos and video, and Terrace Loft are always stand at service. They're very good, local photography studio. But doing this, again, saves the resources of the media organisation from having to send out their own photographer. But what you can do as well is just give them a range of options. Take all the headshots of your team. You can do some nice action photos, some team, casual photos, something of your product in action or being used by, third-party people, that human element. And you can do it with video as well. But it just goes such a long way to making it that much easier. They need to have some imagery. They can't really run an article with no photo. Think about the way that they share these articles. They have a photo at the top of the article. When they're sharing it on the social media, there's always a preview image and things. So there needs to be some imagery, and you don't want your article to have some boring stock image from pexels.com at the top of your story. It's not going to get the same traction. So do that, and then you can use that for heaps of other things like your own website and things. So just invest in doing that. It's really worthwhile. And then again, thinking through how you're going to grab that attention. What is that interesting point that, imagine what is the headline that you're going to have written at the top of the article. That's pretty much the starting point in terms of content. And then the process, like how do you actually pitch this to journos? So I'm a big believer in actually just using the telephone. And I know a lot of people under 30, it probably sounds a little bit scary. But honestly, just having a human voice at the other end of the line makes such a massive difference to building that trust in the relationship. You can write up a media release, and I'm not going to go into the details about how to write a media release. It's a little bit dry, but there are some really good tools, and I've got a link at the end of this to a great guide on startupnews.com.au. And email it in a Word document format, or even just paste it into the body of the email. Don't send it in a PDF file. That'll annoy the crikey out of them, because when they go and try and copy and paste your PDF file, they're going to have to reformat it, and just make it as easy as possible for people. Send them everything that they need in one go. A lot of people just create a nice little public Google Drive with the images and a link to the document and videos. And then just be a little bit realistic and helpful. You're not going to necessarily belt it out of the park the first time you try approaching a journo. So just understand that there's a lot of different competing interests. There's a lot that goes on in a newsroom, and they're not going to give you a run necessarily the first time. But if you follow up, if you find out what it is that they do want to write about if you're not successful the first time, or if you figure out that maybe they're not the right organisation for you, move on. Just being sort of a little bit soft like that, softly approach will go a really long way without being too pushy. So here's an example. This happened a couple of weeks ago. There's a client of ours called The Pack Australia, and I mentioned there's a band called Joan and the Giants. So Joan and the Giants have 70,000 listens on Spotify, and they got about $400 from Spotify as a result, which is, in the scheme of things, not a lot when it costs them about $3,000 to produce one of those songs that's on Spotify. And it's getting harder to gig and things like that. We're lucky in WA, but yes, it's difficult as an independent artist. And so these ladies, Mel and Harry, have created an amazing product called The Pack, which is a streaming service for independent bands who aren't signed to a label. And so you can listen to local bands. They get and you sign up for a subscription. They get a much bigger slice of what the listens are, but it also encourages local venues and cafes to play music from local bands in their area, and so they get a slice of the revenue from that as well. So it's a really nice story because people can really relate. Everyone kind of probably knows or has a friend who's a muso or is in that sort of space. And rather than them necessarily being the prime part of the show, they made it about the band and about how it's going to impact them and how it's going to make their lives better. And so they actually ended up on ABC News 24. They were on ABC News that evening in Perth and Brisbane. Mel did live radio on ABC 720 and Perth, and they ran the story on the abc.net.au news site and shared it on their social media, and it was incredible. They had they had the doors knocked down in terms of new sign-ups and things. It was unbelievable. And so the things that worked were, ABC is the obvious choice for this. It's that kind of market, a little bit probably more left-leaning, I suppose. Probably more likely to be in that muso space. They also have those associations for Triple J and things like that. So ABC was, and then ABC had all these other channels. It's not just the online. It's the TV. It's the ABC 24. It's the radio, and it's their social channel. So incredible reach. And this was just on one day. So it definitely was a sugar rush for them, and there's certainly petered away, but there was certainly also off the back of that an elevated sort of amount of activity that continued on through. And now they're able to put the ABC logo on their website and say that and have this great content that they'll be able to use forever as well. So it's more than just the one day's coverage that they were able to do. The things that these guys did really well is, yes, they picked the medium, but they also figured out which journalist it was that writes stories like this in their local area. So they knew Nick Pevovich, who does a lot of startup stuff, but also music scene and art scene stuff. So they worked on the relationship with him. They prepared the content in a one-page format, gave them the Word document about exactly what they're about. They had their own they did have their own photography and film crew, but as it turned out, ABC was so interested in it that they sent out their own. And then they were available on the day to do live crosses on ABC and radio. It was a really successful campaign, but it's certainly a sugar rush for them. But the ongoing stuff is about making the most out of that one-off bit of coverage. So, of course, do all the usual things, humble brag, share it on social media. Hey, look, Mum, we're on the news. Email blast it out to everybody that you know. After all, if you have an email list, like, what else would you ever use it for if it wasn't for this? Pop it on your website with a logo and a link to the article. And then I'm going to talk a bit second about building a media kit, but have links to all of your coverage that you've ever had inside a media kit, so that when in the future, if you ever have media coverage, it's all there. The journo doesn't have to go Googling for whether or not you've had a run. But something that journos really don't like is running the same story that another journo's run in the past, or the same hook or the same angle at least. So making sure you're giving that to them so that they can find their own unique angle on what you're doing is really important. Print it out, put it in a frame and hang it on your wall. Like, it's something that's to be proud of. The world saw you up in lights, and when people come into your office or when your partner asks, why are you still working on that bloody startup, you can say, hey, look, this is more than just about me. Like, this is something bigger than me. A lot of people care about this. It gives you that kind of validation that what you're doing, you're onto something, you know. And if you're lucky enough to have TV or some sort of video coverage, this is the real gold when it comes to growth marketing. So what we've seen works so well is grabbing that 30-second clip from the news with the announcer doing the preamble and leading into the story, and in the first sort of couple of seconds of the story, turning that into a video which you put onto some sort of ad campaign on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. That content will perform anywhere from 5 to 10 times better than a branded ad that you can do of your own. It's unbelievable how much better it works because it's coming from that trusted source, it's social proof, it's someone else saying great things about you rather than yourself. So when we recommend that clients do PR, it's actually the ultimate view is with them having that little bit of video that we can then use on an ongoing basis and then put paid ads behind to really ramp up the coverage. Because at the end of the day, the likelihood of all of your customers seeing that one piece of media at that exact time is pretty low. But when you can take that content and stretch it out and make sure that the people who really need to see it, that's when it becomes super powerful. So that's when you get the most out of your news coverage. So 3 takeaways, to-do list. Do your research. Find out which journos are the ones that are ideal for your customer base. So find out those ideal publications and journos. Almost all of them will have their email publicly available on the news website. It's usually not that difficult to find their phone number and reach out to them on Twitter and connect with them there. Set up your online media kit. So that media kit, which consists of your one-page positioning statement, your photos, your elements, your product shots, screenshots, that kind of thing. It's a nice, neat little bundle. Canva, if you look up Canva's media kit, they've got a really nice example of that. It's probably overkill for any of us, but you know, that's something to aspire to one day. And there's a lot of examples of online press kits. And then link to it on your website. Make it public. Don't hide it away. And then finally, jump on startupnews.com.au. He's got a really great write-up, 3-part series about how to write a media release, how to pitch it. Probably goes into more detail than this. And yeah, just sort of like follow those processes. There's a few templates and things as well. But it's really not about just churning out media releases and flicking them out as cold emails. It's about being targeted and pointed and specific about what you want to achieve. So that's the 3 main things, I believe. The other thing is we do offer this as a service now. We never used to, but we've sort of started to see how valuable it can be to startups, and we're working with an ex-journalist with SBS World News and The Australian and Channel 9 called Ryan Emery, and he did a lot of that work for the Pack and is very well connected just with journalists in Australia. And so this is something that we're offering now at Ammo. So if you're ever interested, we're happy to talk to you about that, but that's not what we're here for. So thank you. I've done this quickly so that we can have a discussion and a bit of back and forth, but please, if you can, we'd love for you to follow us on Weird Growth, which is our podcast, where we talk to founders about the strange and unpredictable journeys that they find themselves on. And we're up to episode 22. We've talked to some really great founders there, and we make sure that they give us some really good little nuggets and bullets of information and tips and tricks. So weirdgrowth.com, you can check that out. And then please follow us on Instagram, because we're putting a lot of these tips and tricks out just on Instagram stories on a daily basis now as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Let's have some questions if you like. If anyone's got any.
With your startup at the startup weekend,
yeah,
how many users did you end up getting to?
About 20,000 by the end, by the time we decided that we shouldn't continue with it. Yeah. But purely PR.
Was it also a sugar rush?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Every time another article would come out, you would see that sugar rush big time. Yeah. Yeah, and so what started to happen was there was a little bit of that viral element that might have happened. That it definitely didn't happen with the PR, but because people would talk about it, and because of the type of customer that we were dealing with there, they would talk and share. Yeah, but couldn't work out how to make money out of it.
Yeah.
So made it pretty tricky. Yeah. Anything else? I'll grab a water.
You sort of mentioned earlier that PR is not a super scalable form of marketing.
No.
What do you see on that scale at each end, and what are some of the more scalable forms?
Yep. So PR's down the bottom left, up the top right, which takes a long time but can be super scalable with things like content and SEO. And that's not for everyone either, because these days every major corporation has a content team, which are just constantly pumping out content. So that's not for everyone unless you've got a really hyper niche, I suppose. And then as you come down, there's paid ads. So paid ads you can turn on tomorrow, and that's scalable as long as you have money, and as long as what you're spending money on in terms of paid ads can be attributed to directly to sales, and you're spending less than what you're making. So that can be super scalable though, if you can build that flywheel. And then there's things like having a sales team, having referral incentives and word of mouth and things like that, affiliate programs, so where you're actually incentivizing people to refer you. Depending on product market fit, that can be really powerful.
Yeah.
All sorts. Yeah. We've got another talk on that side of things, and it's really about how to find your product market fit and channel market fit too. Yeah. Yeah. Good question though. But what we see is like some of these things can work hand in hand. So that PR content, put that into paid ads, and that will multiply the effectiveness of a lot of that paid ad content that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I haven't heard channel market fit before. What's the definition? Or just
Well, it's what channels are you using to reach the market that you're targeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Marketing channel.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Just a question, and sort of off the back of that, where do you see the longevity coming from the PR campaign? Is it doing those things like if you do have video, bumping it into your digital advertising, or is there other ways that it has a longer life than the sugar rush? Yeah,
look, I kind of see it as priming the pump, I suppose. So it's a nice short-term way to test the waters and see if it's something which does capture people's attention. But you're not going to grow sustainably by getting an article in a newspaper every week. It's just not going to work. But I think if you've got a product which does capture people's attention, something they want to talk about and share with their friends, and there's sort of, I hate using the word viral, but there's some sort of like virality to it, then it's a great way to prime the pump, feed that shot of first users in, and then see if that flywheel continues. So that's sort of where I see PR fitting in with the whole sort of customer journey, I suppose. But yeah, the sustainable stuff, it might come from building a community. So that might be how they kick off that community and find ways to then have that sort of core base of users who then need to sort of bring others in as a result of being involved, whatever that is. Yeah. But the other aspect to it might be that if you have a look at what Elon Musk does, he uses more unconventional PR. He's brought it to an art form, and by being, I suppose, outrageous sometimes and over the top and over promising and under delivering, he sort of has got that kind of like orbit of media always hanging on for his next thing to come out of his mouth. So you can get to that kind of point, but whether or not that's like a sustainable thing or it's going to come a guts one day, who knows? But it does seem to deliver. Yeah. The other thing that is worth thinking about if it aligns with your brand and what you're trying to achieve in the marketplace is more unconventional things. So think about when Uber first launched. Their playbook for launching in new cities was doing things like delivering puppies from the dog shelter to workplaces and letting people pat puppies, or having ice cream on demand to work. And it was all kind of low cost stuff, but with the aim of getting a run in the media and then creating that sort of buzz and word of mouth, I suppose. Yeah. So there's some of those unconventional things that you can do, but whether or not it aligns with your brand or whether you're capable, those that you have capabilities in house to do is another thing. It's kind of risky. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any difference in the approach between business to business and business to consumer?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do see that. But the one thing to keep in mind though is that business to business is still person to person. It's just different channels, I suppose, and that's the thing about LinkedIn as well, is if you have a look at the LinkedIn posts that perform the best, there's a photo of a person or a few people, there's a long form kind of like heartfelt story as a general rule, it's not just a link to a business article. There is a human element and story to it. Those are the LinkedIn posts that get the most likes and comments and shares. So when it comes to PR for business to business, by the way, it's actually pretty easy to get a run in business news, and that's a really good place to start. You'll definitely get a run in startupnews.com.au if you send them the article already written. So that's really low-hanging fruit. But the difference is that you're probably just speaking with a slightly more professional angle, but there's a lot of commonalities. People still have an emotional response to a business message when they see their competitors doing really well, or fear of loss, or a risk that they haven't seen coming, or an opportunity for them to make more money. It's the same kind of concept. Yeah. And the West Business section as well. Kate Purnell, I think, really good person to know if you're in that space. And again, the key is going to be, they don't just want to hear what you're selling. There needs to be a human angle element, real world kind of examples that they can hook into to make it interesting for them. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's it. If anyone ever wants to chat, I'm more than happy to help. That's what we're here for. So please do feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction or give you tips or whatever it is. But other than that, it's been fun. Hope you got something out of it. Thanks very much. Cheers.